Herzlich willkommen zu 99 zu 1. Welcome to 99 zu 1. This is another English episode, another episode on Israel's war on Iran. And today we have Ori Goldberg with us. And here he is. Welcome back, Ori.
It's great to be back. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, the last time I saw you in Herzliya, actually, a couple of days, I think Herzliya was hit also by one of the rocket barrages. So
It
first
was.
question, how are you doing? How are your friends, family? Are you okay?
Yeah, we're okay. We just shelter several times a day, very often at night as well. So we've been on very little sleep, generally as a country, for the past 5 or 6 days. Other than that, except of course for the poor people who were hit. And this morning there was a major hit. Other than that, we're doing okay.
All right. Yeah, so yesterday I had a talk with Seamus Malik Afzali. We already talked a little bit about the geopolitics of it. I want to focus a bit more on Israel's mind space, but of course also tap a little bit of your expertise regarding Iran, as you have been a scholar on the subject. So maybe we can speak about this also a little bit. First of all, maybe give us your impression of the events. Like a couple of days ago, a week ago, Israel started that war, started to attack Iran. Iran started to retaliate. Where are we at right now? What's your estimation of this?
In a situation like this, where the war dynamics are, tit for tat, we do this, they do that. Uh, Pretty much every moment is a pregnant one. Things can happen and things can escalate and things can shift into other modes. But I think right now everybody's waiting on the American decision whether to join the Israeli offensive or not. That's probably the most important event that needs to occur over the next 24 to 48 hours, most likely 24. If the United States joins, and by joining I mean it sends strategic bombers, B-2s, with bunker busting bombs that can hit underground, can penetrate underground to where the Iranians are keeping their fissile material, the actual enriched uranium they need to perhaps construct a bomb, then that's a big deal. That escalates into something like a regional war. Iranian attempts to hit American targets, um, and it's easier to hit American targets for the Iranians than it is for them to hit Israeli targets because American targets are much closer, and not all of them are necessarily well defended. And if that happens, the United States has to retaliate, and everybody's sort of bogged down in a chain reaction that leads to a much broader conflict. If Trump decides to stay on the sidelines for a bit, then that also changes the balance because that means Israel is stuck. Israel is now doing everything it can do, and Israel has aerial dominance over most of Iran, certainly over Tehran. Israel can bomb at will, and that's what Israel does. Israel is bombing. Supposedly, it's bombing regime targets to convince the Iranian people to rebel against the regime, which is, you know what, I don't want to use regime. Regime is a belittling,
It's
demeaning
derogatory
word.
already, right? Yeah,
Yeah, it's a belittling, demeaning word. Israel is bombing official Iranian targets, Islamic Republic targets, because it wants to, at least that's what Israeli officials say, to get the Iranian people to rebel against the Islamic Republic, which is, of course, very stupid generally and even more stupid specifically, because there's nothing Iranians like less than the sensation that external forces are trying to dictate for them what their political arrangements are. And it's also stupid generally because people who are being bombed incessantly are not in a position to break out in rebellion. So Israel can continue to bomb, but it can't do much more. And in that sense, Iran is like Gaza for Israel. Because in Gaza, Israel can continue and is continuing to kill Palestinians on a regular basis, on a daily basis, dozens, sometimes more than 100. And it's sad and somewhat cynical to say that that represents Israeli constraints, not Israeli strength, but it's true. It's easy to kill Palestinians for Israel. It's the easiest thing to do. You get fighter jets up in the air and they bomb targets, and the Gazans cannot respond in any significant way. They can't shoot rockets. They can't fire on the fighters in the air. So that's what Israel does, and that's the only thing Israel can do. If Trump doesn't join the offensive, if Israel cannot present its attack on Iran as something that expands into either an overall attempt to topple the Islamic Republic or an actual accurate attempt to hit the underground nuclear facilities, then what is Israel doing? Israel isn't doing anything much. And if that happens, if the United States decides to, again, remain on the sidelines, then there's room for diplomatic involvement and perhaps some hope that this war will end sooner rather than later.
Why do you think, like, you have a special take on this that maybe you can also give us? Why do you think now? Why did they attack Iran now?
I think, make a long story short, they attacked Iran now to divert the world's attention from Gaza, to rally the world around Israel again, and make Israel appear to be completely in the right, and everybody who's not Israel completely in the wrong. And the reason was that Israel, I think, really has exhausted all of its options in Gaza. Yeah, and I think Netanyahu sensed the shifting in global momentum. I think he understood the criticism that was finally being leveled at Israel, even from Germany, although the German chancellor, was it yesterday or the day before, actually snapped back to attention and talked about how much praise he has for Israel, for the Israeli military. And
they are doing our dirty work in Iran.
Yes,
that's what he said.
yes, doing dirty work for all of us. Israel is being altruistic, which is exactly the way Israel wants it to be seen. Okay, so I think Netanyahu realized that this was what was happening, that he couldn't do anything in Gaza that might even remotely seem like movement or, of course, not victory. So he used this attack plan in Iran, which I'm sure has been in place for a long time. He jump-started it, I would assume, a few weeks ago, and it took that much easily for it to get started, and he carried it out. This isn't about Iran. This isn't about an imminent nuclear bomb that the Iranians will construct. It isn't about any kind of geopolitical emergency. It isn't even about regime change. Israel, exactly as it did in Gaza, changed its definition of the war goals in motion. What took months in Gaza took less than a week in Iran. So the only permanent consideration that motivates Israel is what it's doing in Gaza and the response to the global response to what Israel is doing there, to the Israeli genocidal campaign. So that's why I think Israel attacked Iran. That's why I think Israel attacked Iran now. And now Israel is dependent on the United States to take Israel's chestnuts out of the fire for her, to make it seem as though the Israeli attack is actually an attack that ensures world peace or that is necessary for regional stability. I'm still not aware of anybody who thinks that's the case except for Israel. Even Iran's potential opponents in the Gulf don't think that's the case.
Yeah. I mean, that's been their thing since day two. I think they started officially addressing the American government to intervene in the war and take part, and have been pushing. I read an article, Wall Street Journal, I think it was yesterday, about how AIPAC in the USA started calling senators like crazy. Like one of the senators was called 100 times in one day by AIPAC members to convince them to, state on social media that they support American intervention. So yeah, they're crazy about that, and that brings me a little bit to that question about that relation between the U.S. and Israel. So some people are saying that this whole negotiation thing that was going on, these supposed 60 days, that this was all a ruse, that the U.S. kind of knew about, that Israel was going to attack, and they were just holding Iran basically by the hand to not prepare for it, to be surprised for it. So people say that Trump wasn't even serious about the negotiations. At the same time, Trump is like signaling every day that he wants negotiations, although negotiations for him really means surrender, because it means Iran giving up all their aspirations to a nuclear program, also to being even a regional power in the first place. They have to give up all their rocket arsenal and stuff like that. So what do you think the relation, like, is Israel, is there some space between Israel and the US, or are they in this together actually?
Oh, I think there's a lot of space between Israel and the U.S. And I don't, I somehow doubt that this was all a ruse. And the reason I doubt it is because I think there's a lot of real distrust between Netanyahu and Trump. I think Trump remembers very well that in his first term, Netanyahu tried to present himself as the brains behind the Trump operation. And he remembers the New York Times cartoon that showed Netanyahu walking Trump on a leash. I don't think Trump trusts Netanyahu, and I don't think Trump likes Netanyahu. What I do think is that Trump doesn't really care. Trump wants to leverage any potential opportunity. So he doesn't mind having two contrasting options on the table. He doesn't mind negotiating with the Iranians and seeing where that leads him. And I think, in fact, he prefers a deal to an attack. I think he always has. I think the people who voted for him don't want to see America involved in another war. I think that doesn't suit the Trump agenda as far as cutting military budgets goes. And I think Trump is under severe criticism from the right wing of the MAGA movement as we speak. So I don't think Trump wants a war. Trump was negotiating, but Trump also said to Netanyahu, you go ahead and do what you want. And if it works out, then I'll join. And if it doesn't, screw you. Trump wants winners. He doesn't want losers. And I think Trump offered Netanyahu support in Gaza, or not support. I think Trump offered him the same deal. I think Trump told Netanyahu, you do what you want, and I'll come in if it works, and if it's good for me, then I'll join. You're talking about the 60 days and attacking on the 61st day. Trump is not great for holding up ultimatums on his end. I don't know if you remember, but during the supposed ceasefire a few months ago in Gaza, Trump said at one point, if Hamas doesn't release all the hostages by Saturday of this week, I'll
All
open the
hell to
gates
pay.
of hell. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Right. So, and no hostages were released and no gates were open. So this is Trump. Trump stirs up a lot of noise and potentially a lot of opportunities and wants to capitalize on the opportunity as it presents itself. I don't think this was a joint Israeli-American effort. I think this was an Israeli operation. And the Americans were notified, but the Americans let Israel do it on its own and with clear understanding that Israel will bear the brunt of whatever needs to happen.
One question that went through my mind lately, that I'm thinking of. Clearly, most analyses of the relation between the U.S. and Israel is one of how's that called, principal agent kind of situation, where you have like the principal, the U.S. and Israel is an agent, is dependent on the U.S. and is dependent on their support, and that means that if the U.S. says stop, Israel will stop. However, I thought, is that really the case? Like, is it not possible that the agent in this case, Israel, also has the ability to draw the principal into a conflict that the principal might not even want himself? In the case of Iran, it would be Israel just attacking Iran, escalating this, then being attacked by Iran itself, and thereby being endangered as the agent that the principal values so much, and then the principal would have to enter the fray anyway. So do you think that this could be more like the dynamic that Israel is trying to actually really force the US, not just ask them into this?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that question now, because I think just yesterday Netanyahu made it a point to say on record that he wasn't forcing Trump to join the campaign, that he was, that Israel wasn't doing that. Sure. I mean, I think Israel tries all sorts of manipulation to make the United States enter the fray and join it. I don't doubt that the sort of considerations you're proposing were on the Israeli mind. Absolutely. I don't know if this was the entire goal of the operation or not. But I think the point I want to take from what you're saying is how dependent Israel is on American assistance here. Not just in the sense of getting the job done, but everything from money to materiel to strategic help to just really just about everything. And in that sense, I think there, it's not so much about Israel being overly manipulative. It's about Israel really, really being very, very needy in this case, and demanding that no, demanding is not the right word. Israel needs the United States much more than the United States needs Israel here.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Israel is the weaker party. Israel has a lot of manipulative potential. Let's call it that. But Israel is the needy party here. It's not the other way around.
Yeah. The question would be that though, if Israel is actually threatened, and I'll come to that question now, whether that's even the case. But if Israel were to be actually threatened by the war with Iran, to actually be in danger, would Trump or would the US be willing or even able to just drop it and just say, okay, bye bye Israel? I don't think they would go that far, but maybe that gets to the question now: how do you estimate these counterattacks by Iran? Like, is Israel in any danger? Do they perceive this as a danger? Is this for them something that they are considering, or are they just moving ahead with whatever they're planning?
So far, Israel is not in any kind of existential danger. The Iranians have not struck national infrastructure installations. They haven't hit the water system. They haven't hit the electricity system. They're not aiming for power stations. They're aiming for military installations mostly. And that, by the way, is the IDF assessment, not my assessment. Will the United States be able to just say, well, Israel, it's your fault, it's your problem, whatever? Probably not in so many words, but the United States can do all sorts of things. There are all kinds of delaying tactics, and we need to talk about it. We need to coordinate it. It's not clear what's happening. Trump can always use American domestic politics, American domestic politics as an excuse for not stepping up exactly when Israel wants him to step up. He's the president of the United States. He has a lot of tools at his disposal. And I kind of think that's what he's doing now, by the way. I don't know if he'll end up joining and then the United States and Israel will ride off into the sunset together, but he's definitely sending a message now. And the message is I'm not at your beck and call. I don't do anything you tell me when you tell me. I think that's important. I think other world leaders are looking at what's happening now between the United States and Israel. And again, I don't see Chancellor Merz or Prime Minister Starmer or President Macron completely changing their rhetoric and siding with Iran. But I think everybody is beginning to understand that the overall blanket impunity that was granted to Israel is not necessarily in the best interests of the global north, let's call it that.
Okay. Maybe let's zoom out a little bit, because I want to tap your expertise on Iran too. So maybe the question is, what's the actual source of the animosity towards Iran, or maybe also from Iran towards Israel? Let's say on the one side, maybe we put Israel and the US, because the US, of course, since 40 years has been having Iran in their crosshairs. But also from Iran's perspective, I remember listening to a lecture from you that was pretty striking, where you made the point that most of Iran's alleged imperialism is of much more of a defensive nature, and not one of establishing itself as a regional power, maybe the new boss in the Middle East or something like this. But maybe I also got that wrong. I don't want to put these words in your mouth. So explain why are they actually, I mean, it's a stupid question. Most people might know, but what's the problem between them? Why are they fighting?
It's not a stupid question at all. I think it's probably one of the most important questions. And they're fighting because it started out as an ideological issue. When Ayatollah Khomeini, the father of the revolution and the first supreme leader of the Islamic Republic, was in opposition to the Shah. The Shah's close alliance with Israel was a real issue, because Israel represented the incursions of global imperialism into Muslim territory, I don't think it was ever. There is some anti-Semitism at the top echelons of the Iranian leadership, but I don't think it was ever about anti-Semitism. It was about that imperialism framework. You know, Israel is the West stealing Muslim land to clear its conscience after the Holocaust. And it began there. It began with the Islamic Revolution needing to maintain its revolutionary outlook towards the world. And revolutions are violent and confrontative, and you know that's what they're looking for. They're looking for hostility. And it was all about America, right? The great Satan. We have to bring the downfall of America, and Israel is America's stooge. That's why America is the great devil, and Israel is the smaller devil. And then what happened was, well, for all sorts of reasons, mostly political, the Israeli leadership and the Iranian leadership understood that it would be good for both of them to have each other as a sort of an ongoing potential enemy. Because you don't have to start a war because you don't share a land border, but you can talk about and build up force and try to um, combat the potential influence of your enemy in the region on the way to being a regional power. And don't forget again that Iran and Israel and Turkey as well were close allies up until the late 70s when the revolution put a stop to that. And the fight for influence over the Arab Middle East again is not surprising. It makes a lot of sense geopolitically. That was why and how it began, and it has lasted for some time, and certainly over the past 15 years it has escalated. But I think the important thing to remember is not so much why they're fighting, because after so much time, um, hostilities take on their own logic and their own vitality. The reason doesn't really matter. It's not about accomplishing a specific goal. It's about subduing your enemy. What's important to remember is that both sides give as good as they get, that it takes two to tango. That this isn't about a peaceful Israel being pestered by a fanatic ideological Iran that seeks its destruction. I mean, during the time Iran was building up networks of cooperation with what a lot of pundits call proxies. I don't think most of them are proxies, by the way. But Iran was building up cooperation on the ground with organizations that surround Israel in the hope of constantly pestering Israel and perhaps at a time of war, ultimately occupying Israel or doing away with Israel. Israel was spending billions and billions of dollars building what Israelis call a strategic arm that was directed exclusively at Iran. You know, the Israeli military has something like 30 odd major generals, which is the highest rank below chief of staff, who's a lieutenant general. There is a major general that devotes all of his time to Iran. That is a very, very big deal. That's a very big deal. That's a lot of money in research, a lot of money in adapting an entire air force for a strategic strike, which means striking in Iran. A lot of money for weapons, including nuclear weapons. Israel has nuclear weapons. You know? Iran doesn't. Israel has them deliverable on a broad variety of platforms. So it's a big deal. And the biggest deal is, again, that both sides were carrying out this war. Israel was sinking Iranian ships on the high seas. Israel was assassinating Iranian citizens on Iranian soil. Iran tried to do the same, but its abilities are much more limited than Israel's. So, at the very least, even if you don't want to say Israel good, Iran bad, or Iran good, Israel bad, what's important to remember is that you've got two parties that have a lot of capabilities and a lot of interest in pursuing and maintaining this war. And ultimately, war is its own justification. That's exactly what happened. And then, by the way, that was the situation when Netanyahu opted to attack Iran. Nothing had changed dramatically. It wasn't that there was an Iranian nuclear weapon.
Yeah. then how about, like, if you talk about these networks, which Iran used to call the axis of resistance, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and other groups. What was Iran's goal there? Like, because ultimately, let's put it the other way around. Let's go from the propaganda in the West. Yeah, Iran is a terror state that funds terrorism, with its only goal to dominate with terrorism the Middle East, destruct Israel, maybe drive all the Jews in Israel into the sea. So what would you say was their purpose behind building that axis of resistance and, pestering Israel as much as they can? Is there a truth to this, or would you see that differently?
I don't think there was much of an axis. I think there were a lot of separate cooperations that were interest-based. And I think there were two reasons, one more of an offensive nature and one more of a defensive nature. As far as the offensive reasoning goes, that's the way Iran generates influence and shapes its environment. The Iranians see themselves, by the way, exactly as Israel sees itself, as besieged by hundreds of millions of Arabs in a hostile area, and with the full knowledge that given half an opportunity, all of these Arabs will converge on Iran and attack it, and that they want to see Iran gone. It's exactly the same as Israel sees itself. The difference is a difference in approach and perhaps a difference in the worldview. Israel isolates itself from the region. It signs agreements only with the countries that really either want nothing from it or want what it has to offer. But even then, those agreements are not what's called people to people. They're for businessmen, they're for security establishments. In most cases, Israel builds fences or occupies land and operates using its superior military. There was a time when Israel used to strike Hezbollah convoys on the Syrian-Lebanese border. That's your typical Israeli surgical operation. A plane lifts off from Israel, flies, drops a bomb, comes back. That's it. We build fences. We don't want to talk to these people. We don't want peace with the Lebanese. We don't want peace with the Syrians. We want to be left alone. It's beneath us. The Iranians operate in the exact opposite way. The Iranians think that the best way to prevent their potential enemies from converging on them is to be constantly in friction with those enemies, to be in everybody's face. Wherever a decision might be made that could affect Iranian national security interests, Iran wants to be there, which is why Iran has people on the ground all over the Middle East, which is why Iran is interested in having close relationships, sometimes proxy-like, sometimes less so, but certainly always involving funding and training and the creation of some sort of dependence. Iran wants that kind of relationship any place it can build it. And Hezbollah in Lebanon is easy. That was when Lebanon was a battleground for all, the big players in the Middle East, especially during the Civil War. Iran wanted to be represented. It was just a short while after the establishment of the Islamic Republic, and they felt that they needed to have a Shia organization in Lebanon that would oppose the secular Aman. But it's true, around the Middle East. That's the way the Iranians operate. They want to be there. They want friction. They want to be relevant. In stark opposition to Israel. That's where this network of organizations began. It later grew into a whole host of offensive opportunities against Israel. These organizations could make life difficult for Israelis. Iran did not fund or approve Hamas's massacre on October 7th, 23. But Iranian funded, in many ways, Hezbollah in Lebanon was happy to come to Hamas's aid and prevent Israel from opening a northern front by invading Lebanon, that sort of thing. So that's the rationale behind these organizations. That's what happens to them.
So how about the destruction part? Does Iran just want to destroy Israel? Is that their aim?
I really don't think that's the case. I think that behooves Israel because it helps Israel present itself as moderate, as fighting the good fight, fighting for Judeo-Christian principles against the demon of Islam, of which Iran is the most radical representative. And that actually got Israel a lot of credit, especially in Europe. Europe, with its thousand-year fear of the Muslim menace.
Yeah.
Europe that still talks about how it was saved in 1683 from the Ottoman onslaught at the gates of Vienna by the Polish king Kazimierz. Um, Definitely, I mean, it wasn't it, the German chancellor's words about dirty work, about
Right.
Israel doing the dirty work. That's the dirty work. The dirty work is getting rid of rising Islam. But things have changed, and they've changed probably predominantly because of Israel's genocidal campaign in Gaza. It's no longer possible to talk about Israel as a moderate factor, as a pro-Western Judeo-Christian element in the otherwise savage Islamic Middle East. Certainly not in the eyes of most of the world. And the fact that Israel still tries to cling to that, it was always a fiction, but Israel still tries to cling to the time when that fiction was passable as a reality. It says a lot of things about Israel and its adaptability to changing circumstance. Israel doesn't want to take responsibility for Gaza. Israel wants to be applauded for Gaza. It wants to be given a prize. It wants to be recognized as, like I said, the ultimate warrior for the forces of good. But, apparently that's no longer possible, even in a world that hates political Islam, that fears Iran, that feels itself historically obligated to Israel, certainly in Germany, what with the whole Staatsräson, the whole notion that the reason for the existence of the German state is to make sure that Israel stays safe. All that guilt, all that historical baggage, Israel managed to burn all those bridges over less than 2 years with its genocidal campaign in Gaza. So things have changed, even if Israel refuses to admit it. And that's where we are now.
So you talked before about how the reason why they attacked now is one of a feeling that the winds are changing regarding their campaign in Gaza, and trying to unite or reunite basically the Western Front behind them, supporting them again in this time in the war in Iran. And that's why they started basically like some kind, maybe it's not a diversion, but it's like okay, we start another war so that everybody supports us. And it seems like this is, at least until now, the statements from the heads of the governments seem supportive of this. Actually, nobody talks about Gaza anymore. That's also a success there. The question is, okay, this is to the outside. Now to the inside, has this also worked? Like, I mean, Israel, before we saw, at least here in the West, they like to show that a lot of demonstrations happening, bring the hostages back, some demonstrations against Netanyahu's government, etc. So has it worked also to reunite the supposed split in Israeli society behind this offensive now?
It has. Israelis rally around the flag. You can't have demonstrations now because the missiles are flying through the air, and who knows where a missile will land. But even if that was not the case, yes, Israelis think that regardless of how much they don't like Netanyahu or don't trust Netanyahu, doing this is obviously the right thing to do, and it would always be the right thing to do. An entire generation of Israelis grew up on a narrative that said Iran was out to destroy us. Before that, previous generations grew up on narratives that said Arabs were out to destroy us, Palestinians, Egyptians, Syrians, whatever. Now it's all Iran. That's all Iran wants to do. That's the reason for Iran's existence, is the destruction of Israel. So the fact that Israel is not playing nice anymore, the fact that Israel is taking its destiny into its own hands, that's a good thing. It has to be a good thing. It's not just good, it's historic, it's biblical. It's about Israel redeeming itself. The fact that Israel flip-flops, the fact that Israel started out by talking about the nuclear program, and now they've moved to full-fledged regime change as though anybody knows what the hell that means. That doesn't matter. Israeli citizens are supportive of this action, pretty much en masse. I mean, you got a few freaks like me, but we're so far out there as far as most Israelis are concerned that we don't even get threatening emails. Okay, I mean, I did 3 interviews on British media, Sky News and BBC, and I got more hate mail from British Jews than I ever got from Israelis. Okay, because yeah, I mean, obviously we're right. Obviously, this is the phrase used is "this is the most just war Israel has ever fought," which was exactly the phrase that was used when Israel began carpet bombing Gaza.
Gaza, yes, exactly.
The similarities, the parallels are uncanny.
And do you feel that there is a window for this, like a possibility for this to change again? And what would it take for this to change, for people to maybe...
I highly doubt it. I don't think Israeli society is capable of change at the moment. I think 2 years of enabling a genocide at the very best. I mean, I'm not talking about people who actively and vocally supported the genocide. I'm talking about people who averted their eyes and said, "It's unfortunate, but what can you do?" And this was the entire Israeli society in many ways. Okay, so
Right.
after 2 years of that, Israelis are insane.
All right. I mean, one question. These last two questions that I have are, again, looking for your crystal ball, Ori. But maybe one is not so much looking into the future, but more about understanding better what Israel is actually doing there. I mean, yesterday I talked to Seamus, and we counted through all the fronts that Israel is currently engaged with, and we came like to 6 or 7. They have been pummeling Syria. They are still actually, by the way, yesterday they attacked, I think, some ships or something like that, and the reason was they want naval hegemony in the area, so that's why they attacked those Syrian ships. Even though Syria is quite, submissive to Israel's demands and projects. They have been obviously attacking Iran now. Then we have everything going on the West Bank and Gaza. What's their end game in all of this? It seems like do they have anything beyond this idea of constant war? I mean, their term security that they're talking about, right? They're talking about security all the time. It seems like that what they understand as security is exactly this: them being constantly pummeling and attacking anywhere they please, anywhere, at any time they want. Also in Lebanon, for example, there is a supposed ceasefire going on, but still they can bomb whatever they want at any time, and Lebanon and Hezbollah should better not respond. So what's their end game? How do they imagine this turning out? Do you know?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. That's exactly the point. The Israelis are now defining security as possessing the ability to do whatever they want whenever they want. That's the prize. The prize is not forces occupying Beirut or establishing an Israeli presence in Damascus or taking over Hudaydah in Yemen. That's not the point. The point is possessing the ability to do whatever they want, and the knowledge that when they do whatever they want, they'll get away with it. Okay, that is security the way Israel defines it now. And it's perhaps the only way Israel can live with the implications of the genocide in Gaza. Because Israel is saying, hey, we're constantly under attack, so we have to reclaim that right. That's the only way we can survive here in a Middle East full of heathen Muslims. And that's the price. That's what Israel is fighting for. So when you hear our Minister of Defense apparently just gave a guidance saying that Israel has to hit more government targets to ultimately topple the Islamic regime. What the hell does that even mean? It means absolutely nothing. It only means something in the context of this forever war that you're talking about. But it's not a war that is meant to achieve some clearly defined political end. It's not even a war when it's in Gaza. It's not even meant to achieve the death of all Palestinians or the expulsion of all Palestinians. True, there are Israelis who would like to see all Palestinians expelled so Israel could reclaim Gaza for its own. Yes, and they're quite vocal and they have a significant presence in government. But the current leadership of Israel, certainly the prime minister, what they want is the sense that Israel can really do anything and get away with anything. If you want a good analogy, it's like that Trump remark about how he could stand up naked in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot his opponents to death and he would get away with it. That's what Israel wants. And I think, by the way, that's where Israel, or at least Netanyahu, thinks he may have um, true rapport with Trump. That Trump gets him. I don't know if he's right, but I think that's where he sees a connection.
Is it then is it even conceivable that an agenda like this turns out in something that, like, can Israel just subdue all its enemies all the time and create
No,
peace like this for itself? I
no,
mean, ultimately, that they would like to have that at some point, I guess.
no. Israel doesn't want peace, and no, Israel
Actually,
can't.
doesn't want peace. Yeah. Mm.
No, and Israel can't do this to its enemies all the time. That's. Look, I don't want to sound too preachy here, but I have to get a little preachy. Maintaining this paradox uh, of a Jewish and democratic state, but also a military dictatorship. You have to base that on lies, on fiction, if you will. The notion that you have to do it, the notion that there's no choice, that the Palestinians are animals, that whatever, it all works, it all applies. Israel can't do this alone. Israel is subsidized to the tune of nearly $4 billion in defense acquisitions by the United States. Israel already devotes the second highest the second highest budgeted government ministry is the Ministry of Defense, and Israel can't really increase its defense budget without turning into a modern day Sparta, without letting go of the welfare state, which is still a hallmark of Israeli society, um, in favor of a military where, almost like Eritrea, if you know the stories about the Eritrean military, where you serve for life. Um, that's what Israel is looking to become, apparently, if it follows this trajectory. And if that happens, then a lot of smart Israelis will leave, and there'll be a brain drain, and Israel will deteriorate quickly in terms of the capacities and capabilities of its inhabitants, and will turn into a full-fledged third world country very soon. Um, so I don't think Israel can do it alone. I think it's another one of the lies that serves as the foundation for this paradox that is Israel at the moment. I think if Israel wants to live, Israel has to make a change. I don't know if Israel is capable of making that change from within. Perhaps that change has to be imposed on Israel in a similar way to South Africa in the early 1990s. But Israel can't keep going the way it's going. It's not sustainable, not in terms of physics, not in terms of finance, and also, and I may sound idealistic here, but also in terms of principle and morality. Because Israel that is able to do that, and Israel that enjoys this sort of impunity, is a disaster waiting to happen. And the world really does have a role. It's a question of whether the world steps in.
And that's the point where I'm pessimistic, which is like seeing what the US and the rest of the world is doing regarding Israel. It seems like they have gotten comfortable in that notion that they're basically behind that idea that Israel can do whatever it wants whenever it wants. And even though you're right, just before the Iran war, some criticisms were leveled at Israel. For that to actually materialize in material change, it seemed like there's still like a couple of dozen steps ahead in order to even get there.
It's true, and Israel is also, never forget that Israel is fulfilling a collective fantasy held by the global north of
Yeah,
really
exactly.
taking the fight to the brown man. It's
Right.
true. But it's also true that Israel is becoming a liability for its supporters. It's true that Israel can't be relied on. It's true that Israel systematically burns all the bridges it has and all the goodwill it has managed to accrue, and even the sense of historical debt, that where there's nowhere where this is as prominent as it is in Germany. I think there's a huge gap between the official position and the position held by a great majority of Germans. Certainly young people, by the way. So if Israel is looking to the future, I don't think this is sustainable. I don't think the political systems in the global north will sustain their unconditional support of Israel for much longer. Because Israel really has taken dehumanization and a complete flouting of all the rules within international law to new levels. It's not about how many people Israel has killed, it's about the way in which it has killed them. And I think a great many supporters of Israel are radically alienated from Israel at the moment, and Israel is only working to expand and exacerbate that alienation. So this won't happen tomorrow, but change will come.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell by the Western countries also escalating their repression of dissident voices as this becomes more prominent,
Yeah,
that people
yeah.
are dissenting. The question is how really the question just becomes, okay, how far are they willing to go? I mean, Merz, for example, can now say they're doing our dirty work and like officially and openly thereby actually commit a crime in front, like in terms of the Geneva Convention, because he's committing that he's submitting that this attack on Iran was lawful and correct, and he's supporting it. And also he doesn't seem to care. Like it's kind of like we have our own little Trump here, you know, and people just start to push the same strategies and
True.
push the accountability down the road, and
You,
maybe
you,
never even face it at all.
you're not wrong, Nadim. This isn't going to happen tomorrow, and
Right.
it's up to a generation of young people and progressive people to take up the challenge. But I can at least say that the lines appear to be clearly drawn. Okay, probably as poignantly as ever. Um, it's now clear what's on the table and what everyone's fighting for. There's no way to justify what Israel is doing through recourse to any kind of sound historical or legal argumentation. This is now about supremacy or equality. It's now about an international legal order or an each man for himself world. And it's also, by the way, when I think the leaders of the global north, of the West, are looking at the world right now, only the stupid ones are not realizing that the alternatives offered by, say, China appear more and more palatable each day, more and more lucrative and attractive each day when one looks at what the West has let Israel do. Israel as a representative and a symbol of Western ideals. That's a real thing, and that's a real threat. And if the people who don't realize that, well, this is going to blow up in their face sooner rather than later. I don't think that leaders like Merz will change of their own accord. But I think there's still hope from somebody like Macron. I think there's still hope from Spain. There's hope from Ireland. There's hope from all sorts of countries in the EU. And I think there's a real split for the first time in decades about how to treat Israel. And I think this is becoming, again, like I said, Israel is becoming a liability.
Okay, last question. Let's get your crystal ball out. What's going to happen now? What do you think? I mean, you already talked about probably the decision regarding U.S. intervention happening next 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah.
It's also my feeling that something is going to come there. What do you think we are looking at?
I would be surprised if Trump joins Israel overtly and starts attacking Iranian bunkers. Regardless of the strike this morning on an Israeli hospital and all that. I think the United States is going to delay this perhaps even longer. And the more time passes, the worse it is for Israel, despite Israel's ability to bomb Iran incessantly. I think this is going to take days, maybe a week or two, but it's going to ultimately end in some kind of brokered resolution. I may be an incurable optimist, but I don't see this spreading out to be a full-fledged regional and possibly global war. Nobody wants this. Nobody. Not the United States, not China, not even Russia. Nobody wants this war. And the fact that Israel seems to think war increases and improves its security, well, I think Israel is going to be unpleasantly surprised. It may take, again, like I said, days, a week, or 2 weeks. I don't think it's going to take much more. I am an incurable optimist, but this is, at least for me, a reasoned analysis based on the way all the sides, all the parties to this conflict have been behaving.
Okay, Ori, thanks a lot. Let's hope your optimism is warranted and you are right. That would be good. Let's stay in touch. Let's talk. New developments probably happening in the next couple of hours, and we can have another episode going. Let's see. Stay safe, okay, man?
I will. And you know where to find me.
I do. Okay, Ori. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Leute, wir brauchen eure Hilfe. Wenn euch dieses Video gefallen hat, klickt auf Like, abonniert den Kanal und vergesst nicht das Glöckchen zu drücken, damit ihr benachrichtigt werdet, wenn wir neuen Content droppen.
Außerdem solltet ihr uns überall folgen, wo wir verfügbar sind. Das ist Facebook, Instagram, Twitter und Twitch. Und wenn wir irgendwelche Ankündigungen machen oder Posts, dann shared, was das Zeug hält. Gebt uns all eure Liebe.
Wir haben mittlerweile ziemlich signifikante Kosten. Wenn ihr es euch irgendwie leisten könnt, unterstützt uns doch auf Patreon. Dann kommt ihr auch in den Genuss verschiedener Vorteile, wie zum Beispiel Zugang zu unserer Discord-Community oder Zugang zu den ultrageheimen Patreon-Episoden, die wir dort posten. Außerdem könnt ihr uns natürlich auch über PayPal Spenden zukommen lassen.
Außerdem haben wir mittlerweile einen eigenen Online-Shop. Das heißt, wenn ihr euch immer noch fragt, was ihr euren Lieben zu Weihnachten, Ostern oder sonst wie schenken könnt, geht dorthin und kauft duftes Merch.
Alle Links dazu hier in der Beschreibung oder auch auf unserer Webseite 99zu1.de.
Vielen Dank fürs Dabeisein, danke für die Unterstützung und wir sehen uns in diesem Theater.